Hello everyone, Happy New Year, thanks for tuning in to Gazovids on the first day of 2019. So, the weather's changing a bit today, new year, new weather. We've had very mild, quiet, cloudy weather over the past week, really since Christmas. Been pretty dry but cloudy and mild. Brightening up today, but it is turning cold as well. We are going to have some pretty cold weather actually coming up in the next week. It's going to be some hard overnight frost. There'll be probably freezing fog patches as well, and daytime temperature is going to be pretty chilly, I have to say. And if that fog lingers overnight, then it could turn actually very cold through the day. So freezing fog could mean that daytime temperature will struggle to get much above freezing. The caveat, of course, with that is that you never know how much fog you're going to get these days, because we don't get as much fog as we used to. Even 10 years ago or so, we used to get a little bit more fog than we do now. It's a good thing, really. It's primarily because the air's a lot cleaner. We don't get the particles in the air from vehicles and such like that we used to get. Even 10, 15 years ago, you used to get a lot more fog because the air quality was a lot poorer. So it's a good thing, but we don't get as much fog, and of course fog is very disruptive as well. It can cause a lot of problems with travel. So it's all round a good thing we don't get as much fog, but I expect we will get fog in the next week or so, and some of that could be dense and freezing as well, so it could be pretty nasty. Of course, we've got stratospheric warming, so I'll have a look at that in today's New Year's Day, Sunday roundup, and we'll have a look at the weather for next week, 10 days as well. See CFSV2 at the end of the video. You're going to have the AO, the NEO as well, so sit back, get yourself a cup of tea, and some little nibbles, and we'll talk you through the New Year's Day roundup very shortly. Just say, coming up later on, you're going to have Terry Scully's January forecast. I'll be with you probably around 4 or 5 o'clock. I mean, tonight I might do an ensembles watch if I can fit it in. We'll go through all of the GFS ensemble members and see what they're showing. Will there be signs of colder weather and blocking from this stratospheric warming looking towards the middle of January? We may do an ensembles watch this evening, so keep a lookout for that. Before I do anything else, though, I've got to say a big thank you to our latest donors. So, once again, really, really kind people tuning in to the videos and donating to Gazovids. So I have 4 donations for New Year since yesterday, since I did the final video of 2018. So I'm going to say a big thank you to John Mitchell. John Mitchell has become a donor for Gazovids. I'm also going to say big thank you and Happy New Year to Wendy Stuckey. Big thank you to Daniel Mackenzie, and big thank you and Happy New Year to Gary Scott. So, Happy New Year to John Mitchell, Happy New Year to Wendy Stuckey, Happy New Year to Daniel Mackenzie, Happy New Year to Gary Scott, and thank you very much, all 4 of you, for becoming latest donors for Gazovids. It really is something very, very kind that you are doing for Gazovids, doing for the website. Helping us to pay to keep website online. I told you yesterday that the stats have gone through the roof in terms of the viewers and visitors to the website, and of course that means that we have to pay to increase the services to Gazovids, the servers and such like. So again, huge thank you to our latest donors and all of the donors since we started this back in June. If you'd like to become a PayPal donor for Gazovids, then all you have to do is come to the Gazovids.me PayPal page. This is it. I'm on that page right now. Sign into your PayPal account, and then very simply you can donate whatever amount of money you would like. You will get a shout out in video. You're going to mention in video, say hello and thank you very much for doing that. Unless you would rather stay anonymous, if you would, then just leave a little note with your donation to tell us. And I'll still mention that I've had a donation from an anonymous donor, but I won't give the name. So that's how you do that. Of course, there's also Patreon as well. We have 52 patrons for Gazovids. Hello and Happy New Year to all 52 patrons for Gazovids. If you would like to become a Gazovids patron, then all you have to do is come to Gazovids Patreon page. You sign up for a Patreon account, and then very simply you can pledge whatever amount of money you would like. The idea with this is that it's like ongoing, so that's why you're a patron, and with PayPal it's like a one-off donation. So however you want to do it, it's there for you if you would like to do that. And again, a big thank you to all of the donors, big thank you to all of the patrons for Gaz Others, and Happy New Year to all of you. Right, we're going to start off with solar activity then. So we've got the Sunny Roundup coming back on Sunday. We haven't looked at things like solar activity, sea surface temperature, anomalies for a little while. I think the last time we looked at all of this was back when we were doing winter updates. Finished those at the end of November, of course. And we've had a little bit of rest through December, but we'll be back with the Sunny Roundups from this coming Sunday, the first Sunday in January. I thought just to set the scene of what we're going to be discussing in the Sunny Roundups every week, we would do a little bit of a New Year's Day roundup. So we'll start off with solar activity. This is the latest in terms of the solar disk on Outside of This Today from solarham.net, and we are completely spotless. There is no sunspots whatsoever on the solar disk. And therefore, solar activity is at very low levels and is expected to remain at very low levels for the next 3 days at least. This is the Gaz Others New Year's Day Solar Activity Tracker, updated to today by a good friend, James Ackrill. Big thank you to James. Happy New Year to James for sending this through, and say Happy New Year to James. So this is how things are looking in terms of solar activity. Again, you haven't seen this for around a month. We can see that we are at very low levels of solar activity once again, and I'm going to get the highlighter ready, so I get all the charts lined up, and I've got to get highlighter ready before I started the video, so sorry about that. Anyway, we'll switch that over. Let's do that. We'll switch to display mode and take the highlighter down to there, and then we'll start it up. So there we go, and we can see that we are at very low levels with solar activity right now. So the thick green and thick red lines, these are our trend lines. They're pretty much at the bottom of the graph there, depicting that we are at an extremely low level of solar activity. The orange line is each individual day's sunspots, so we are still getting some days of sunspots. Actually, it was a little bit on the active side, the sun, albeit at a very low level during December, but it probably had a little bit more activity with sunspots in December than we had like in October or in November or in September. So probably a little bit more active during December, but at a very low level of activity, if you see what I mean. But it was probably enough to tick the trend lines up just that little bit. Actually, through the middle part of December, we do see the thick green and thick red lines just lifted up ever so slightly. They're dropping back now, and as I say, we are at a really low level of solar activity right now. We have had several more days of spotless or near spotless conditions there since around the 17th of December. Been a very, very quiet sun. Indeed, I think we've had the fewest sunspots this year since around 2008, so that just ties in with the fact that we are at solar minimum now. We're very close to solar minimum. We don't know when true solar minimum is going to occur, of course, because you never know when you've reached solar minimum until you've passed it. But we know that within the next, possibly the next year, maybe a little bit more, maybe a little bit less, but around a year, we are going to be reaching true solar minimum for solar cycle number 24, and then we will go off into the next solar cycle number 25. So we can expect to maintain very low levels of solar activity, certainly through the rest of this winter, probably through the rest of 2019, really. And maybe beyond that, maybe even into 2020, we will keep very low levels of solar activity. You'll be seeing a lot more of the solar tracker in the weeks ahead as we get the return of the Gaz Others Sunday Roundup. This is how sea surface temperature anomalies are looking. Again, I haven't shown you these charts since we finished the winter updates. So got the two areas specifically that we're interested in. We've got the Pacific Ocean over here, and we've got the Atlantic Ocean over there. And of course, within that, there are three areas that we're interested in. So we've got the tropical or equatorial Pacific Ocean just there. We've got the Northern Pacific over here, and we've got the Northern Atlantic over there. So first thing we'll deal with is ENSO. This is how things are currently looking in terms of sea surface temperature anomalies through the ENSO region. So just a very, very weak signature for El Nino. I mean, it's barely an El Nino, I have to say, but there is still just enough there to show that we have got a very weak signature for a warm event, a very weak El Nino has been taking place. I suspect that's about the peak of it. I don't think it'll get much stronger than that. These events, be they El Nino or La Nina, usually peak around Christmas, and then they'll decline through the first 3 or 4 months of the following year, going back to ENSO neutral by spring. And then, of course, as you get into summer, you have to look and see where you're going to go next. Will you go to El Nino? Will you go to La Nina, cold event? Will you stay at ENSO neutral? That's something we'll be discussing much more as we get further into the year. But that looks like it's pretty much the peak of this El Nino event, and you can barely call it a peak or an event, really, because it has been very, very weak. Very weak El Nino indeed. It may never actually get designated. I'm not sure if it will or not. You have to meet strict criteria, which we will talk about in the Sunday roundups in the week ahead. And also the monthly ENSO updates will be starting up again during January, of course. Going further north into the Pacific Ocean, that's how things were looking yesterday on New Year's Eve. So just cooling down a little bit, actually, in the northern part of the Pacific Ocean. Over towards the Canadian and American side of the Pacific just there. Still quite a bit warmer than average, but it looks like it's cooling down compared to how it was a couple of months back when we was doing the winter updates, but still relatively above average. And I think overall the PDO, the Pacific Decadal Oscillation, is probably still in its positive phase at the moment. I think there's enough warm waters within the non-Pacific Ocean to show that the PDO would still be in its positive phase at the moment. In the Northern Atlantic, very little change, so cooler than average sea surface temperature anomalies persist in the northern part of the Atlantic Ocean. Then going further south into the central and tropical Atlantic, it looks close to average, but going right down into the African side of the tropics around here, a little bit warmer than average down there. What we look for, one of the things that we look for to get a cold winter is a tripole. Of course, we look for a warm band there, and then a cooler band there, and then a warmer band there. It does look as though we're beginning to get some warmth going through the tropical Atlantic, which is interesting. But otherwise, the sea surface temperature anomalies in the Northern Atlantic aren't really conducive towards a negative NAO. That's not to say we can't get a negative NAO with these sea surface temperature anomalies, but you need something to force it. So, like we're having the southern stratospheric warming at the moment, maybe that will force blocking and a negative NAO, but it will need something to force it, because the Atlantic itself isn't in a state that is conducive towards negative NAO, which we know because we've just been through a mild and positive NAO type pattern through December. So if we're going to get a pattern change, it won't happen from the Atlantic on its own. It will need something else to force that pattern change. Quite warm up there in the Norwegian Sea, you'll notice, warmer than average sea surface temperature anomalies up there. You'll be seeing a lot more of these charts when we do the GasWeather's Sunday roundup. As I say, that's all going to start. It will start on Sunday. Right, centering temperature is in for December and for the year of 2018. So this is how things are shaping up at the moment. So this is 2018 just here. Been a very interesting year of weather, of course. We started off with a very mild January. Then we had a pair of cold months in February and March. And then we went through that really warm phase through April, through May, through June. We was running a temperature anomaly of around 2 degrees above average. peaked in July, but an incredibly hot July. I think it was around the third hottest month on record, and one of the hottest Julys on record as well. Still warmer than average in August, but the temperature did start to lower a bit, certainly nowhere near as hot as it was in July. And then we have September and October, which interestingly came out almost bang on average. So quite a cool down took place through the early part of the autumn compared to the summer, compared to average. Of course, you'd expect it to be cooling down anyway through the autumn, but I'm talking about compared to the long-term average. We was running way above average through most of the summer, and then into the early autumn we went down to very close to average. But then things changed again in November, which was a very mild November, and we have had a very mild December indeed. So December CET comes out at 6.9. Really warm December, although only the warmest since 2015. So just scroll you up a little bit, that's 2015 just there, which had an extraordinarily warm December at 9.7. That's around 1.5 degrees above the warmest Decembers on record up to that point, which were 1934 and 1974 tied. So it's around 1.5 degrees above average. Very freak month indeed, taking place during a very strong El Nino. Of course, a Super Nino was going on during that winter of 2015-2016. Probably that accounted for some of what happened in December 2015 anyway. If you take that freak month out of December 2015, then actually the last time we had a December as warm as this, as mild as this, at 6.9, was a very long time ago, 30 years ago. I have to go through the 2000s, through the 1990s, and up into the 1980s, and you get to the year of 1988, which in December of 1988, it had a CT of 7.5. So taking out the freak month of December 2015, you would have to go back to 1988 to find a December as warmer than December 2018. So it has been a very mild start to the winter indeed. I think milder than we expected, milder than we anticipated, definitely both in the December month-end forecast and also in the winter forecast. I don't think, although we said December probably wouldn't have much way of cold weather, I don't think we was anticipating December to come out as exceptionally warm as this December has done. Also been another very warm year, of course, despite the pair of colder months that we had in February and March. All the other months have either been average or warmer than average, which means that our yearly CT comes out at 10.69, another very warm year to add to 2017, to 2016, to 2015, and also warmest year on record, which is 2014. The last time we had quite a cool year was 2013. That had a CT of 9.61. And then 2012 also had a CT of 9.72. So there are a couple of cooler years. 2011 was a very warm year at 10.72. And then the last really cold year was 2010, including the December. Do you remember, of course, that one had a CT of 8.86. It was the first time it had a Central England temperature for the year under 9 degrees since the 1980s. So it was a very long time coming, but it does look as though December 2010 was the year 2010, and also I suppose December 2010 was a real one-off type year, and that cooler period hasn't been maintained, and certainly over the past few years since 2014 we have been going through another run of very warm years indeed. This is how the yearly CTs are looking from Hadley, going back to 1772 and up to 2018. That blue bar just there is 2018. So you'll see what happened with the trend line. That's quite interesting. The red line is the trend line, and you'll see that for a few years, from around 2007 to 2012, 13, that trend line actually moved down. There's that very unusual year of 2010, by the way, very cold year of 2010 showing up there. So from around 2007, 2012, that red trend line was dropping down, but you see it has lifted up again. So obviously since 2013 we have gone off into another very warm period indeed. Very significant warming trend has taken place since 2013. As I say, this blue bar just here, that is 2018. It does come out under the warmest year on record, which is that blue bar there, 2014, but not that much in it, and we can say that since 2014 we have been in a run of very warm years again indeed. We'll wait and see, of course, what 2019 has in store for us. So this is how things are currently looking at 10 HPA over the North Pole in the stratosphere. We can see we have had the southern stratospheric warming, of course, as we know. That occurred on the 29th of December. We lifted that black line up to a very warm level indeed, almost going to -10 Celsius at 10 HPA, which is one of the top layers of the stratosphere. It's cooling down a little bit, although still significantly warmer than average. The grey line is the trend line, and we see we're way above that. So it is cooling down. It has cooled down slightly over the past couple of days, but still much warmer than average. If we go lower down to 30 HPA, you can see the warming is still going on there. So we're now very close to around -40 at 30 HPA. Obviously, again, we see this black line lifting up quite dramatically, way above the trend line, which is the grey line. So the warming occurred at 10 HPA, southern stratospheric warming is now moving down into a lower level, closer to the troposphere at 30 HPA, and we are expecting impacts for the troposphere in the next few weeks, but we don't know what those impacts will be, of course. Latest forecast from the GFS at metroshield.fr is suggesting a split of the polar vortex. If I run you through, you'll see that the blue area there, that's kind of like the polar vortex at its root, so it's colder than average temperatures there in the stratosphere. Displaced, we've already displaced those cold and average temperatures into the North Atlantic and over into Europe. But you'll see they get pulled apart as we go into the 4th and the 5th of January. There we are on the 5th and the 6th of January. That is highlighting quite a clear split now, I think, of the polar vortex. So we've got 2 lobes of blue, one going into North America, one going into Europe. In between we've got this lighter shading of blue and green. So that tells us around the 5th, 6th of January, a split of the polar vortex at its roots is likely before the polar vortex then starts to close up again, begins to come back together. Notice another quite significant warming of the stratosphere taking place across the northern parts of Russia there on the 9th of January. And that continues into the more extended range where it kind of starts to fizz out. Almost has a go at splitting the polar vortex again there on the 15th of January. But as I say, it's a very significant warming of the stratosphere that will almost certainly have some impacts on the troposphere, but we don't know what they will be. Zonal winds look like they're going to be going into into reverse any time now, very imminent. So this is the box that we're interested in now, the one showing 10 and 30 HPA zonal winds. The blue line here, that is the zonal wind at 10 HPA. You can see it's virtually at 0 now, so it's virtually gone into reverse with the zonal wind. And certainly in the next couple of days, we can expect the zonal winds to go into reverse. It is now beginning to highlight as well chance of a reversal of the zonal winds at 30 HPA. The red line is showing 30 HPA, and then the black line is the forecast. And you'll notice by the end of the ECM, this is from the ECM, by the way, at the University of Berlin website. By the by the end of the ECM run at day 10, we have virtually got a reversal of the zonal winds at 30 HPA. So we could well, from this, find that the zonal winds are going to go into reverse both at 10 and at 30 HPA, and a split of the polar vortex at its roots in the stratosphere is looking very likely. So if that all comes off, then there are going to be impacts from this sudden stratospheric warming, but it will be a case of waiting to see what those impacts are. One of the ways we will see if we're going to have impacts is through the Arctic Oscillation. So if we start to get blocking appearing over the North Pole, we will find the Arctic Oscillation going very negative. It will go into negative territory. Remember, this is just an index that's reflecting the state of the atmosphere over the North Pole. It's not driving anything, just tells you what the atmosphere is doing. The black line shows where we've been with the Arctic Oscillation. Red lines at the end where the GFS ensembles are forecasting the Arctic Oscillation to go. This was yesterday, New Year's Eve, when the Arctic Oscillation was around very weakly positive and being forecast to stay very weakly positive for a few more days. After that, though, going further through the first week and into the second week of January, I think generally the trend is down into negative territory with the Arctic Oscillation, although there is a little bit of a split in the ECM ensemble. Some of them are in positive territory up here, but I think there's more Arctic Oscillation ensemble members that are going negative with the AO through into the second week of January. So it does look as though the AO is already starting to trend negative, and it's quite early days actually for seeing effects from this southern stratospheric warming. It may not be until sort of mid to second half of January that we really start to see the effects of it, but already we might be seeing signs within the Arctic Oscillation observed and forecast chart. We might be seeing signs of the AO going negative. Remember, when the AO goes negative, you'll have blocking opal, you have high pressure opal. That's what forces the AO negative. So blocking is the route to pushing cold air out of the pole and down into the mid latitudes. At the same time, you also look at the NAO. This is how the NAO observed and forecast chart is looking. That's a little bit different to the AO. So again, the black line shows where we've been with the NAO. Red line's at the M, where GFS ensembles forecasting the NAO to go. We're actually a little bit negative with the NAO at the moment. We're forecast to stay a little bit negative with the NAO through the first week of January. But then into the second week of January, the trend within the GFS ensemble seems to be to take the NAO into positive territory, which is a little bit at odds with what the AO is being forecast to do. That's probably just highlighting a lot of uncertainty within the model output about this sudden stratospheric warming and what its impacts are going to be. Remember, the Atlantic sea surface temperature anomalies, as I told you at the start of the video, are set up for a positive NAO. That's the default state of this winter, that the Atlantic wants to be in a positive phase due to the sea surface temperature. So something else is going to have to forecast, going to have to force the Atlantic into a negative NAO state. It would mean either the southern stratospheric warming or something else will have to force the Atlantic to go into a negative NAO. The Atlantic on its own, with its sea surface temperature anomalies, is not in a state that can produce an extended period anyway of negative NAO conditions this winter. So we're looking for something else to force the Atlantic into a negative NAO state. It could well be that southern stratospheric warming, but we'll have to wait and see. These are the GFS temperature and precipitation ensembles next couple of weeks. So the red line here is the 30-year upper air temperature average. You're looking at London today, so starting off pretty mild just for today. It's still mild down in the south, but cooling. A cooling trend is in evidence. We're going to go cooler than average as we go through the first few days of the new year. Then the upper air temperatures lift up through this period just here. That's quite an interesting period because the upper air temperatures are lifting up, but it's still going to be pretty cold down on the surface actually. There will be a lot of frost and fog, or a lot of frost anyway, coming up in the next week. We wait to see how much fog we get. And then we go into a second week of January, and we've got a real split still showing up then within the GFS ensemble. So we've got several ensemble members up here, very mild, but several but now that are going really very cold indeed, going down to -10 at 850 HPA and possibly even a little bit lower than that. So we still have this real split within the GFS ensembles, and that's why I'm thinking of doing an ensembles watch tonight for this second week of January, going up to the middle of the month. See how many of those ensemble members are producing either Greenland or Scandinavian highs around the middle of January. Precipitation wise, it just continues to be pretty dry really the next week. No measurable rainfall at all in London, and then after that just very slight precipitation spikes, even going up to the middle of January. looks pretty dry, which is totally different to this time last year when we was actually in a very wet phase of weather. Now look at that, temperature anomalies are going a little bit colder than average from the 1st through to the 9th of January, below average temperature anomalies, particularly focused on England and Wales. And that's not because of Arctic or Siberian winds, that's just because of an area of high pressure sitting over top of the country with quite cold air underneath it, producing lots of night frost and low daytime temperatures, and again potentially a risk of some freezing fog as well. But we haven't seen that for quite some time, that the temperature anomaly is below average. But there it is, the 1st to the 9th of January forecast, below average temperature anomalies, and still very dry precipitation anomalies from the 1st to the 9th of January, looking really, really dry, not just for the UK and Ireland, but for most of Western Europe as well. This is the GFS operational run, showing high pressure over top of the country on Friday. That continues into the weekend. It's going to be cold under that high pressure, away from Northern Scotland anyway. It's a little bit milder there, more of an Atlantic wind coming around the top of the high pressure, but centred underneath this high, it will be cold through the rest of this week into the weekend, and then even on beyond that into next week, still keeping that high pressure very close to the country. Real northerly blast pushing down into much of Scandinavia and Central and Northern Europe, but we remain on the periphery of that, and this area of high pressure moving up towards day 10. Excuse me again, that's how we look as we get to day 10, which is Friday the 11th of January, and high pressure just through the country still, so very quiet, very dry conditions continuing into second week of January, not taking that high pressure north at this stage, not getting it to Greenland, not getting it to Scandinavia, although it is trying to throw a little bit of a ridge up to Scandinavia, but just keeping things dry, cold, frosty, maybe some fog as well. In a more extended range, this GFS run does break down that high pressure. It turns a good deal more unsettled as we run up towards the middle of January. That's as far as we can go to the 17th of January. We are looking quite cold then, actually. The low pressure is diving southwards with the jet stream, and we're having to go at pulling winds into a northeasterly direction. So that does hint at something a little bit colder through the middle part of January. This is the parallel GFS run. So next year, or I should say this year, now we're into 2019, this year, the parallel GFS run will become the main operational GFS run, but at the moment they're running it in parallel to iron out any problems with this upgraded version. Again, there's a high pressure sitting over the country on Friday, lots of dry, quiet, frosty, cold weather for the end of the week and into the weekend. That continues into next week as well. That's a week away, Tuesday 8th of January. We just moved that high pressure out into the Atlantic then, and starting to turn the wind into the north, so that's having a go at turning things quite cold there. A little bit on the periphery of the cold, which is moving down through Scandinavia, much of Central Northern Europe, but it is close enough to us to probably bring some wintry showers into eastern parts of the country. It certainly looks colder at that point than the GFS is. And then we go up to day 10, which is Friday the 11th of January, and we've still got that high pressure very close to us. It's just out to our west at this point, with slightly milder air beginning to move around the top of that high pressure. In the extended range, though, we take that high pressure eventually northwards. So this time things much colder through to the middle part of January, much colder than the operational GFS run. The parallel run is pulling in real northerly and northeasterly winds with a blocking feature setting up close to Greenland, Iceland and the North Atlantic. There's the upper air temperatures, they're looking very cold. That will certainly be producing severe night frost and probably be producing heavy snow showers anyway for northern and eastern parts of the country. ECM on Friday has high pressure over the country, bringing lots of dry, frosty and cold weather. That continues into next week as well. And then look what happens in the extended range. We start to move that high pressure to Scandinavia. So winds go into the east there by day 10, which is Friday 11th of January. We've got a Scandinavian high, and we're pulling in an easterly wind. Upper air temperatures show we've got the -10 ice bump sitting just to our east. So we've got the GFS parallel and the ECM wanting to turn us cold by day 10 via a different route between the two models. The GFS wants to do it by taking the high pressure out into the Northern Atlantic, the GFS parallel I should say. The ECM wants to do it by taking the high pressure to Scandinavia. So different routes to cold, but they do eventually turn us pretty cold there by the time we get through to day 10. GEM, again, high pressures dominating, bringing dry, frosty, cold conditions through this weekend and in the start of next week. And then eventually we pull down a northerly wind as we go into the second half of next week. And that's how we look at day 10. So really cold air again, plunging through much of Scandinavia, Northern and Central Europe, just on the periphery of it. But overall, it does look as though this second week of January is starting to inch its way towards colder weather now within a lot of the model output. Not guaranteed, it all looks a little bit on a knife edge, or a little bit on the periphery, at least initially. But I do think that model's just very slowly starting to inch our way to proper northerly or potentially east winds. Of course, the coming days are not going to be mild either, because we're going to have frost and fog. So if you have frost and fog through the first week of January, and then we go into cold northerly or easterly outbreaks in the second week of January, going up to the middle of the month, then we could have a very, very different January here compared to December. Finally, CFS V2, so these are the 500 millibar height anomalies broken down into week periods. The first week period takes us from New Year's Day today to the 7th of January, with high pressure dominating over the top of the country. There's the northerly pushing down through much of northern, central and eastern parts of Europe. We're under this ridge of high pressure. But if we looked at the temperature anomalies, the model will probably say mild, but we know we're going to have frost and potentially some fog in the days ahead. And then we go through to week 2, which is the 8th to the 14th of January, keeping the high pressure centred over the top of the country. Once again, just inching it a little bit towards the northwest perhaps, but still looking pretty dry, pretty cold, frosty I would have thought in week 2. Then all change in week, that's week 4. So going to go over there, that's week 3. So that's how week 3 looks, 15th to 21st of January. It's all changed. We take the high pressure up towards middle of the Atlantic and over towards Canada. A big trough of low pressure setting up across Scandinavia and northeastern parts of Europe and into western Russia. That will turn wind into the north. So that's much more unsettled, but also a lot colder. And you just saw week 4, so you know what it's going to show. It has a block, a mid-Atlantic ridge there, and a block of high pressure close to the south of Greenland. Low pressure still to the east, to the northeast, and again, probably a trough in the jet stream, and that looks pretty cold and pretty wintry, potentially from the 22nd to 28th of January. So we've had an exceptionally, it's gone very dark in here. I'll put light on and finish the video. So we've had an exceptionally mild December. Looks like things are changing though for January. Going to start off with frost and fog, high pressure dominating, and then looks like we're gradually beginning to inch our way towards something potentially quite a bit colder, actually, as we get through towards the second week of January and go up towards the middle part. But don't want to go too over the top with that yet. I'm not going to start talking about big freezes or anything like that, but it certainly looks like starting off with frost, dry weather, and then potentially going to something a little bit more interesting from a cold perspective through the second week of January and up to the middle part of the month. Right, that's your New Year's Day Sunday roundup. Hope you found it interesting. We'll be back later this evening, probably, with Ensemble's Watch, around 7 o'clock. And in between then, sometime around 4 or 5 o'clock, we'll have Terry Scully's January forecast. I'm going to stop the video there and go put a light on. That's all for now, and thanks for watching.